Okay. Anyway, hello, folks. Welcome to my ramble, the third of my rambles. Um, and today, as you're aware, I'm going to ramble on about music. Um, I was actually came up with the idea of this talk today. Was I was having a discussion with a member of the Sangha who, and we were discussing music and dance, and he sent me some dance music to do, and it reminded me of a conference I went to in 2006. Um, in those days, a few hundred yards from my house, there was the Sheffield University Department of Music. And a certain person named Stirananda in those days worked there. And he let me know that there was an interesting conference coming up. And when he, I think, told me the name, I thought, I've got to go to that conference. And the conference was called the First International Conference of Music and Consciousness. And I thought, wow, this is great. And it certainly was an interesting conference. And it actually made me think I'd quite like to do some research in the psychology of music, although that didn't ever actually happen. And sort of being reminded of this theme made me think, oh yeah, I will talk about consciousness, talk about music and its relation to human psychology, and also to the Dharma and things like mantra. So that's what I want to do today. And for me, actually, sort of music and the Dharma actually have some interesting overlaps in interesting and apparently random ways, or maybe not random ways. I mean, for example, I'm sitting in this room with a fellow order member who also happens to be my wife, and we met 40 odd years ago at a party in the middle of a dance. We sort of swapped up partners in the middle of the dance, and here she is now, for example. But actually, one of the first Buddhists I ever encountered, this was back in the mid-70s. I was visiting some friends of mine in North London. These were a sort of bunch of hippie friends. They were living in a squat in North London. They were into things like headlessness, if you've ever heard of that. But they're also into freeform dance. So they said, do you want to come along to the dance thing that's happening this evening? It's run by an interesting guy. I said, well, okay, yeah. So I went along to this freeform dance evening, and it was run by an interesting guy. And they told me a bit about him. He was a Buddhist. This is a guy who was in his 60s, then I would guess. And he was a German guy. And apparently, he'd grown up in Germany between the wars and had become very interested in Buddhism. So he'd gone along to, I think there was a community in Berlin of Buddhist practitioners, and he'd asked to join them. And this Buddhist community said, yes, you can join us, provided you do one thing first. You've got to go round Germany for a year without any money. Once you've done that, you can join us. So he did. Yeah. And apparently during the Second World War, I mean, he left Germany and he went to live in West Africa, I think amongst some tribe in West Africa, where he'd learnt African drumming. And here he was in the mid-70s, sort of taking classes in freeform dance. Yeah. So a sort of early indication that sort of Buddhists could be into things like dance, um, music, and interesting forms of dance and music at that. Yeah. And for me, sort of thinking about music, I regard it as a very sort of central aspect of being human, actually. It's a core human, I'm not sure what to call it, a core human activity. And, I find that very, very interesting, and how it is such a core activity. I'm going to go into that. But of course, it's not just a human activity. It's something that we each have various associations and links to in various ways. I won't go into the list of musical instruments that I've dabbled with, for example. But I was trying to remember the first concerts I ever went to. This is way, way back. Yeah, I think the first concert I ever went to was possibly when I was about 7 or 8. My parents took me to my older brother Jim's school, where he was in the chorus for a Gilbert and Sullivan opera. What's it called? Not the Pirates of Penzance, HMS Pinafore, I think. So that might have been the first ever music concert I ever went to. I think a few years after that, a couple of years after that, I might have been taken to the Red Army Choir. And this takes us back to very much to sort of 60s and 70s times. Yeah, and I can remember things like going to my first pop concert to an up-and-coming group. We saw them in the local cinema, but the up-and-coming group was The Who. Unfortunately, for the whole concert, couldn't hear a thing, because in the row of seats behind us, there were a bunch of teenage girls who throughout the whole concert were jumping up and down, screaming. Yeah. So didn't hear the music. Yeah. And then sort of, I think a year or two later, going to see another up-and-coming group at the pop proms at the Albert Hall of all places, where the music was so deafening you couldn't hear the music because you were deafened, sadly. That was Led Zeppelin. Yeah. Actually, Led Zeppelin became one of my favourite groups pretty early on, but I wish they'd turned the sound level down and the like. And sort of other sort of concerts come to mind. I can think of, sort of going with friends to hear, Ravi Shankar, the sitarist, play, for example, or another sitarist I really liked when I was a teenager, somebody called Ustad Imrat Khan, and just being blissed out by the playing of someone like Imrat Khan. So I got, of course, various associations, and I could go on and on about them. Yeah, but I thought sort of music, I would look at how central it is to human beings, first of all. And I'm sort of reminded of this by that conference from 2006. And one of the things I came across in the concert of 2006 was that they were referring to an idea by a psychologist who was pretty dismissive about music in human evolution, and he'd called it auditory cheesecake. In other words, for him, human music and music making and enjoying music just involves aspects of human skills and human abilities and qualities that evolved for other reasons, and we use them to sort of have a bit of fun maybe, but that's about it, and it wasn't very important in human evolution. So I'm going to start with sort of music and human evolution. And I'd point out, I think by music here, I mean, three things that can go together or that can happen separately. Yeah. Music consisting of one, the use of the human voice for song or chant. Yeah. Two, use of instruments, in other words, other ways of making sounds other than just the human voice. And it can be all sorts of ways of making sounds, of course. Yeah. And thirdly, very much including music, actually dance, which, if you like, accompanies music, is an important aspect of the whole of human music making, shall we say. So I very much include dance within music here. Yeah. Anyway, sort of back to the idea of sort of music and evolution. Yeah, this idea that it wasn't very important at all. And I found that very, very strange. Yeah. Come across other sort of ideas about how music might have been important in human evolution. I think the idea is that, with dance, dances might have in the past lasted for a rather long time. So actually, I think this is according to Charles Darwin, so actually somebody who was dancing a lot would show their strength and their abilities in front of others. So it's a good way of choosing a mate. Sort of that was it, basically. I mean, interesting idea, because there is a sort of relationship between music and what you call it, finding a mate, but hardly perhaps the most important thing about it. So I actually started to think about, well, what's involved in music and music making, and what is, what effect would music making have on human evolution? And the more I thought about it, the more I thought that music might be extremely important in human evolution. If you think of the skills involved in humans making music, so dancing, and doing that especially together. Yeah. So if you think about song, it involves vocal skills. It involves communication in all sorts of ways. Yeah. Or if you think about musical instruments, yeah, musical instruments, to play them, it involves dexterity. It involves skillful use of one's hands. Also, if you think about musical instruments, to make them involves dexterity, the use of one's hands. Yeah. Or dance. Dance, like the other forms of actual music making, involves coordinated physical activity, physical actions. And they all involve physical actions. They all involve other things like being very attentive to what other people are doing, being very attentive, keeping your mind focused on a particular aspect of experience that's happening to you, i.e. the music, for example, following it. There are actually all sorts of skills involved in music making and dance, yeah. And I thought, well, what knock-on effect would that be? Supposing you had some, our ancestors, tens of thousands of years ago, and supposing they started to have a bit of fun making noises together, yeah, and making noises with their voices, making noises with, bits of material that around that made some interesting noises. What could happen? But well, maybe they start discovering and creating amongst them forms of music, yeah, and having more fun doing it. But not just that, they'd be doing other things. They'd be learning to coordinate their activities as a group, for example. They'll be developing their dexterity, the use of their hands, for example. Well, how could that help them in an evolutionary sense? Well, it could help them very greatly indeed. For example, if they are making musical instruments, they could be more adept at making tools, more adept at making weapons for going after animals, wild animals, with eating and surviving. And the more I thought about it, it made me think perhaps music is a long, long way from being auditory cheesecake. Perhaps music was actually the catalyst for human evolution at a certain point. That actually humans made sort of fairly fast evolutionary progress in things like language, manual skills, dexterity, working together, being able to communicate each other, because they had fun actually making noises together. And yeah, I mean, one could sort of develop this further, to get a sort of Darwinian flavour to it. It would be the way that those that had the, if you like, the genetic capability to be more dexterous, say, or to be more vocal, who would do well at music making, but then experience the, if you like, the secondary positive effects of being able to sort of hunt together better and work together better, and therefore survive together. Yeah. So I thought, yes, this is quite a sort of interesting idea, And after all, sort of music making is so central to most human beings' lives. I think some people it's just something interesting, some fun, but not too central. But it seems to be, cross-culturally, it seems to have been a vital activity for, a very long time. I think the first sort of actual musical instrument that we've come across was from about 50,000 years ago. Some sort of little sort of bone flute was the one discovered. So it's sort of, Advayacitta's hypothesis of human evolution that actually I think we're misnamed. We're called Homo sapiens, which I think means something like wise hominid. Yeah, I think we should be renamed as to be Homo musicus. Yeah, the musical hominid. Yeah, because in a way it is so important to us. And I think it would be interesting. It's a hypothesis from me, of course, but I think it'd be interesting that it was our ancestors having a bit of fun together, noticing that noises were fun to listen to and exploring them and enjoying them and noticing the beauty in them, that actually, as I say, was a catalyst for their further evolution and the like. So, yeah, so Advayacitta's hypothesis that music is central to human beings and to human evolution. Of course, there are lots of different types of music. And music does lots of things. Yeah. As I mentioned, sort of music, well, in one way, it's about sounds. It's about sounds and making sounds and listening to sounds and it being fun. Yeah, it's about the enjoyment of sounds. Of course, sounds that musical instruments and people and voices make can become highly complex, and there is a beauty in the sounds themselves. Yeah? But of course, music is not just about the fun of the sounds themselves, not just about the beauty that there can be in sounds, music can be about other things. Very importantly, music can be, if you like, the expression and evocation of emotions of various sorts. We want to explore this a bit as well. Yeah. Um, well, sort of go back to that concert of the Who that I mentioned I went to, where we couldn't even hear them playing because of the noises of the girls behind us. A sort of very basic aspect of music and dance. Well, there is something about finding your suitable mate through doing music. Yeah, you know, whether it was 50,000 years ago, maybe, or 50 years ago at the local palais on a Saturday night, or a disco, or whatever. Now, it can be about finding your mate, and you can get sort of pop songs that basically that's what it's about. Um, it is about finding a sexual partner, and singing about that in some way or another. Sort of love songs of one kind or another. But of course, music goes far beyond that. And if we just explore these sort of issues of love here, shall we say, and sexual partnerships, let's sort of see sort of what aspects, how complex music can get. I mentioned the sort of teenage sort of pop songs, love songs or love songs. But it can go, of course, beyond that, and I'm thinking now of perhaps a song like, well, Sting comes to mind, if you know Fields of Gold by Sting. Again, it's sort of very central human activity. Fields of Gold is about, it's two people, and love, sexual love between two people. But there's actually more to the song than that. It is actually much more moving than that, because it goes beyond simple sexual attraction and sexuality. There's actually a sort of theme to the song, which, how could we put it? It is about fidelity. It is actually about meta as well. And the song expresses more than just sort of sexual attraction and the like. It's also, if you know the, people here know the song Fields of Gold? Yeah. And, it's set over a period of time. It mentions later on in the song the children. So it's actually setting a song about a very central aspects of human experience, the family, and the family in the passing of time. Yeah. So actually, I find it, sort of a really moving song. In the original version by Sting himself. Well, there's a lovely version by Eva Cassidy, if anybody knows that one as well. Yeah. Something, how can we put it? It's a song that's expression of something deeper from the human heart, that's there to be sort of actualized in human beings, a sort of love for others, in a very sort of, as it were, commonplace way, through sort of, if you like, marriage and family making, but very much there. Yeah. But of course, there's much more finding partners and love. Its forms are much more complex than that. And of course, music explores that sort of complexity too. And sort of thinking about this, I was thinking of various different songs which deal with the complexities of, what should we call it, of love and if you like, sexual love. Yeah. So Fields of Gold is a very straightforward one about, if you like, the positives and about meta coming into it. But of course, can be a much more complex sort of field than that. Yeah. So I'm thinking of other songs from you know, different types of music. Yeah. There's a song called Sammy's Bar, if people know it. As a man sings of his meeting the woman who he calls his real love, but she spurns him, and she, she says she's gone off with another man. But this other man, is a better man than him, but he drives a Yankee car. But the song is a very sad one because the driver of the Yankee car drove too fast around the bend, and the man and the woman, real love, were killed in the crash. So it's a very poignant song, indeed. Or there can be, if we go into the sort of field of opera here, I remember of it being brought to tears by a song from the opera by Beethoven, Fidelio. There is a quartet in Fidelio. That's quartet of four voices. Yeah. Now, Fidelio, if you don't know it, is an opera about a woman called, I think the name is Leonora. Her husband is imprisoned as a political prisoner in a prison. Leonora disguises herself as a young man called Fidelio and goes and gets a job at the prison in order to try and rescue her husband. Yeah. And there's this very moving song in the early part of the opera because Fidelio, Leonora, is working there, and the head jailer has got a daughter who falls in love with Fidelio. And so the song has the voice of the young woman singing of her love for Fidelio, who is really Leonora, realizing that her attempt to rescue her husband has been made much more complicated by somebody falling in love with her, with complexities that the woman falling in love with her thinks she's a man. Yeah. So there's those two voices. Then there's a third voice comes in, which is the father, the jailer, who's very pleased that his daughter has fallen in love with Fidelio, who he rates highly. And then there's a fourth voice coming in, which is of another young man who works at prison, who's fallen in love with the jailer's daughter and realizes she's fallen for somebody else. So you've got these four different voices, each coming from a different emotional standpoint. And it becomes extremely moving. Each feeling very strongly and expressed through the music. Yeah. And music, of course, can do that. It can express a whole variety of different emotions of various sorts. I'm thinking further about this, various other songs and things come to mind. Again, sort of about the complexities of ordinary human relationships and human imperfections, but love. And I'm reminded, for example, of a song sung by Martin Simpson, which is called Never Any Good. It's a song about his dad, actually. Um, it's called Never Any Good because the words that sort of chorus, if you like, of it are: you were never any good with money, you couldn't even hold a job, not steady enough for the office, not hard enough for the hod. Yeah, it's a song about his dad, and it mentions his dad's imperfections, but also mentions that actually he was a loyal man who did the right and proper thing in the First World War and went and fought in the war, but then made the mistake of joining up with Martin Simpson's mum, but the irony of, in a relationship that was never going to work, but the irony of it was that Martin Simpson himself would never have been born without it. Yeah. And it's a sort of song, if you like, focusing on, on human frailties and imperfections. But it also something very different. It's a song of, if you like, again, of love for his father and what his father sort of gave him. I'll quote the words. You showed me Eyebright in the hedgerow, Speedwell and Traveller's Joy. You showed me how to use my eyes when I was just a boy. And you taught me how to love a song and all you knew of nature's ways, the greatest gifts I've ever known, and I use them every day. Yeah. So again, a sort of song as the expression of love for somebody. And there is often this aspect to song. Yeah, it expresses something deeper, if you like, in the what should we call it, within human consciousness. Yeah. And the interesting thing is how deeply it can go into, if you like, what I call the profound aspects of reality and of human consciousness. Yeah, I remember, years ago, this is back in 1977. I remember I was reading a book. It was a book that was all the rage then, a novel, I forget what it was actually called now, who it was by. And I was reading this book, and it came to a section in it where, unfortunately, it depicted some torture. And I became quite distressed by this torture scene. I had to put the book down, and I had to, I wanted something to calm me down. And, I found it horrible. So I put on some music. Music I'd played before, and I put it on just to sort of relax me. And music was Beethoven. Yeah, it was his Moonlight Sonata, so a piece of piano music. And I put it on, and it was as if I'd heard music for the first time. Yeah. So I recognised something in it that I hadn't recognised before, I hadn't heard. Yeah. And it was as if Beethoven was saying through the sounds of the piano, yes, there is suffering. Yeah. But there is something beyond suffering. It's the only way I can sort of express it in words, that there is something deeper, yes. Music can actually take on that, what should we call it, dukkha, in sort of Buddhist terms. And actually, music can express a sort of reality beyond dukkha, putting it in sort of dharmic terms. Yeah. And yeah, well, I could say I was very struck by the Moonlight Moonlight Sonata that day. And other music, in the sort of Western tradition, for example, reminds me very much of, if you like, something beyond, if you like, something profound beyond ordinary everyday life and everyday human emotion, shall we say, something deeper within the human psyche. The varieties of music that do this. One person who very much music reminds me of this is Johann Sebastian Bach, for example. I've long found it interesting, but I'm certainly not a Christian and highly critical of theism. But I find Bach's music so moving. A whole variety of Bach songs. I don't know if you know Erbarme dich by Bach. Actually, it's a song asking for God's forgiveness. When I hear it, it's in German, and listen to it in translation, it expresses to me and speaks to me of a human being aware of their frailty and imperfection, but also being aware of something beyond that, something deeply answering that. I mean, another piece of sort of Christian music that reminds me of this is Allegri's Miserere, if you know that as well. There is something very deep that can be expressed through music, that musicians, composers, human beings more generally can recognize and respond to. Something resonates, if you like, in us when we hear music that expresses sort of this. And I think it's well put in a quote I've got here from John Eliot Gardner. John Eliot Gardner is the conductor of the Monteverdi Choir. And he grew up in a farm in, I think, the West Country. His dad was a farmer, and they loved singing. At the sort of weekends, I think they would sing. So he learned very young to sing along with others and to love song. And John Eliot Gardner he's a very good interpreter of the music of Bach. And he's also written a very interesting book about Bach. I'm just going to quote a little bit from it. So it says, John Eliot Gardner. Bach, in the breadth of his vision, grasped and then revealed to us his conception of the universe as a harmonious whole. Yet he was composing at a time when the breakdown of social unity was well advanced, and the old structures of religion were fast being eroded by Enlightenment thinkers. Revealing as the work of recent musicologists has proved to be about where his music sort of comes from, it could diminish Bach's music to a bundle of influences, to a collection of parts that are less than the whole. Whereas it is precisely his ability to transform material and weld it into new patterns, and his willingness and courage to strike out on his own, which is so inspiring about the B minor Mass. Without this realization, we run the risk of missing the driving force behind it. Bach's resolve not merely to mime the gestures of belief, nor to interpret doctrine via music of his own invention, but to extend the very range of music's possibilities, and through such exploration to make sense of the world in which he lived and whatever lay beyond it. Even to skeptical and agnostic minds, Bach's B minor Mass radiates a recognizable and powerful spirituality, one that does not rely on creedal orthodoxy, although that might appear. His art celebrates the fundamental sanctity of life, an awareness of the divine and transcendent dimension as a fact of human existence. Interpreting it is all about the drama of discovering the revelation inscribed in each movement, and is indissolubly fused to his personal style, the inner poet hiding in the recesses of his counterpoint. Above all, as musicians, you can never afford to be earthbound, to plod, in other words. It has to dance. Ultimately, his style is also vision. Misjudge the style and you miss the vision. To conduct his Mass is to be filled with a tremendous sense of anticipation. You know, as you embark on a journey with and through his music, you're going to be exposed to a heightened sense of consciousness, of the role of music, of its capacity to affect and change people's lives, of its power to reflect and even to mitigate the way people respond to contemporary events. Then, as you approach the final strait of this great adventure, when the trumpets soar one last time to announce the homecoming, you realize that Bach's final prayer for peace, Dona nobis pacem, is both an invocation and a resounding confirmation of its imminence, which I think expresses it very well, and expresses very much what Bach's music, other music, can evoke or invoke, shall we say, something deeply profound and something, if you like, beyond our ordinary consciousness. Of course, that takes me to something related to music, and something that has personally affected me very strongly over the years, and that's mantra. The chanting of mantras. And I'll just share with you a bit of my early experience of mantra chanting. I think I first heard a mantra chanted in my early days going to Norwich Buddhist Centre. This is 40 odd years ago now. And I went along before the regulars night, just before it, to book for my first weekend retreat. I'd been going to beginner's night. For some reason, I had to go, to book on the retreat. I had to go at the beginning of the regulars night. After I sort of booked, everybody else went upstairs to do the regulars night, which was to do a puja. I lingered on downstairs, and I started hearing this chanting. Yeah. And I knew what it was because I'd read a bit about mantras, but I never heard mantras before. And people were chanting the Avalokiteshvara mantra, and it had me transfixed. Yeah, I mean, it was a couple of years before that I'd heard the Moonlight Sonata as if for the first time. But the mantra was taking me somewhere even deeper. It was the only way to express it. As I say, I was sort of transfixed, sort of moved very strongly indeed by hearing that mantra chanted. It was though, if you like, you could put it, that part of me was resonating to something that was being expressed through that mantra that I'd never heard before, never expressed before. Although it had been pointed to, you could say, by Beethoven's music that I'd heard. Then a couple of weeks after hearing that mantra, I went away on my first weekend retreat, and then found myself doing with other people my first ever puja. And of course, reciting that mantra, being moved very much by recitation of that mantra. And then there was another mantra, the Padmasambhava mantra. And that was an interesting experience, sort of chanting that. Was, I suppose I've never sort of been dissolved into sort of, I'm not sure how to describe it, emptiness, sort of clearness now with the dance of energies going through me. There was something in mantras that sort of, as I discovered, that what evokes something in us that is, as I understand now, call them, one of the terms for them is the subtle energies. But yes, I certainly wasn't expecting it at the time. Mantra chanting can evoke something sort of very profound in reality, as I discovered, but also, if you like, how can I put it? Our energies respond to it, and energies we didn't even know we've had. And to sort of fast forward a bit, mantra, I suppose, has stayed with me as mantra chanting as an important element of Buddhist practice ever since then. In what it evokes or invokes, shall we say. And also sort of relates to practice. It's interesting sort of relating music, chanting, and things like dance to Buddhist practice, because in much of Buddhist practice, you wouldn't think there was much music around. Actually, in some Buddhist traditions, there's lots. And also, there is one archetypal Buddha form who's the Lord of the Dance, for example. And one particular Buddha figure, which is the figure of Padmasambhava, is very much associated with a certain type of dancer. And this is the sky dancer, the Dakini. I was sort of reminded, or had that sort of pointed out to me, as it were, some years back when I went on a retreat led by Prakasha, and who introduced me, or introduced us on the retreat, all the members on the retreat, to a form of the Guru Yoga, which is a yoga devoted to Padmasambhava, in which one, if you like, visualizes oneself as a sky dancer. And my gosh, did that to awaken energies in me. It made me discover, well, I had to dance after that, so there's no question about it. I discovered what a good form of exercise dance is as well. But it actually brought to life, if you like, in a way, the importance of, if you like, how we work with energies within us. For me, but I found that particularly important. That the sky dancer, the Dakini figure, is a very interesting one. That's from sort of Vajrayana Buddhism. The sky the darkening can actually, represent many different things. Actually, if you study the life and liberation of Pamasamba, a darkening can be all sorts of creatures and things. But the darkening usually is the sky dancer, a female figure, although you can get darkers as well, male sky dancers, female figure dancing in the sky. Yeah. That can mean many things. It can be a symbol of, if you like, a female symbol of enlightenment, or a symbol of female enlightenment, as it were. It also, very importantly, means, if you like, the dance of liberated energies in the sky of, how can we put it, Shunyata, or rather in the sort of sky of the immeasurables, Mahakaruna and Metta, etc. And it's actually a very important sort of aspect of practice, to be actually able to liberate and dance with energies. Yeah. So actually dance, which at one end of the scale can be really sort of associated with very basic human activities. On one level, a bit of having fun, although I think having fun is very, very important. On another level, can be a symbol, a metaphor for liberation, for the liberation of actually the energies which are in us, which hold us to samsara, but which can become liberated and dance freely. I think it's a very sort of wonderful sort of image. Yeah. And so I find it very interesting that these aspects of Buddhism, its symbolism and its practice, actually cross over and relate to what music refers to. Although, interestingly for me, my experience is, if you like, the say mantra has gone further than music. Although I think, I haven't a clue what the sort of difference or crossover is between music and mantra. It sounds very similar. But this mantra, the actual specific sounds that you chant, is something in that. I've never been able to answer this question. What is it about it that pronouncing certain sounds? Yeah. I don't know about it, but it's like music, but also mantra and the like. How can I put it? Evoke something deeper in us, and even invoke something profound from outside us. Yeah. I find these sort of very interesting themes to sort of ponder and explore. I was, thinking of sort of the Dharma in musical terms. For me, also, I find it much more natural to sort of think of it in, if you like, these terms, rather than to think in sort of conceptual terms and the like. To put it bluntly, I'd much rather dance with the darkness than develop insight, for example. It means much more. And I thought I'd sort of finish by sort of leaving you with three metaphors for spiritual practice. Yeah, three metaphors. Yeah, and the first metaphor is the sangha. A good, vibrant sangha is like an orchestra and choir playing together, maybe people dancing along with that as well. Yeah. Yeah. In other words, coordinated activities, but each doing their own thing within that. Yeah. So the sangha is like a very good orchestra and choir. Yeah. Of course, a spiritual practice is a bit like learning to sing. My second metaphor. Yeah. And if you don't know if you ever had any singing lessons. Yeah. But you discover if you try and learn to sing that singing doesn't just involve your vocal cords there. The instrument's your whole body. And you have to learn to relax and use your whole body so it can resonate with your vocal cords. Yeah, you have to learn to relax. Yeah, so it becomes a real instrument, which then you learn to play. Yeah, to sing. Yeah. So spiritual practice is a bit like learning to sing. You have to relax, let go, in order to be able to resonate with something deeper, and then express that, through your song, as it were, of your activities. Yeah. And then a sort of third metaphor is this one of the darkness. Yeah. Spiritual practice is perhaps when we have sort of let go, when we can resonate, is discovering, if you like, should we call it the resonant space inside, where our energies can become liberated and dance. So I'll leave you with those three metaphors and stop there if